Out of the newest installments in what's considered the big three fighting game franchises, Mortal Kombat 1 has struggled the most in comparison to its contemporaries in both Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8. I myself like the game quite a bit and believe it's a step in the right direction from the things I didn't like so much about Mortal Kombat 11, but it's undeniably true when looking at the numbers that the game is currently in a very odd place, considering the prestige of the Mortal Kombat franchise in fighting game history, or even just by looking at the numbers it's put up in the past. It's not as if Mortal Kombat is selling significantly worse than Street Fighter or Tekken either, so what gives? Well, the latest addition to Mortal Kombat's gameplay and arguably the largest is the Kameo system. Separate from the main lineup of playable characters are Kameo fighters that act as assists or backup to the player's main fighter character. These Kameos can utilize attacks that are good for things like juggling or crossing some distance with your player character, alongside maneuvers such as Shujinko copying the moves of his opponents for his own use, or my personal Kameo pick Serena, whose neutral Kameo drains meter from opponents, preventing their use of breakers or enhancements on their special moves. While this on the surface sounds as if it would be a welcome, refreshing accompaniment to Mortal Kombat's traditional one-on-one gameplay, it's been somewhat divisive throughout the Mortal Kombat community, from those who just simply do not like cameos or the idea of teams of Mortal Kombat in general since they were introduced all the way in Mortal Kombat 9, to others who point out that while they do enjoy the idea of the cameo system, the optimization or design of the main cast has suffered for it, with the focus being more so placed on strengthening the cameo fighters, leading to the playable cast members feeling weaker when utilizing their own toolset and not as fun to play as a result.
Now, as you're watching this, you may say, well, Tom, it looks like pretty much every player is here. And even though it's just about every single set with every player, I only see 2 characters and 2 cameos. And it looks like every set outside of one was pretty much the exact same for just about every single game. So, Tom, are you telling me that 95% of every game of every set was Johnny, Peacemaker, Chameleon, and Kano? That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Regardless, I personally believe the Kameo system is a pretty nifty new mechanic, and even if I felt otherwise, I would still commend NetherRealm Studios for trying to keep their game fresh for fighting game veterans, casuals, or people just watching from a distance, as well as allowing beloved characters who have been out of the series spotlight for quite some time to return through the Kameo system, like Motaro, Chameleon, or the aforementioned Serena and Shujinko. However, the concept or idea of a Kameo system has existed in a 2D fighting game series before Mortal Kombat 1, and I thought it would make an interesting topic to provide a different perspective on the Kameo system through looking at another instance of this mechanic in this other fighting game series. The King of Fighters is SNK's flagship franchise that's been running for nearly 30 years as of time of recording, and while most of the more recognizable elements of its gameplay have remained untouched across those 3 decades, SNK will occasionally add or change a few other aspects of newer installments in the franchise to keep their games fresh, which is especially appreciated and warranted considering there was indeed a time period where a new King of Fighters game was being released annually across the span of 8 years. The second arc of the King of Fighters story is what fans may recognize as the Ness Saga, encompassing titles like the King of Fighters 99, the King of Fighters 2000, the King of Fighters 2001, and the King of Fighters 2002. While 2002 is a dream match entry in the franchise, which means it has no story and focuses on gameplay that more so returns to series roots, 99, 2000, and 2001 each utilize something new to the series known as the Striker system. The King of Fighters is a team-based game, but not in the tag style like Marvel vs. Capcom, though they tried, and instead players choose a team of 3 characters that are switched out after each round until the entire enemy team has been defeated. These teams are usually made up of 3 characters, but beginning with the King of Fighters 99, the usual 3-man teams were alternatively extended now to 4 characters, and the 4th character would serve as something called a striker for the entire team. Like cameos, these strikers arrive on the stage when prompted to perform some sort of action to aid the player character. But given that the King of Fighters 99 was the first game to implement this mechanic, it isn't as fleshed out as it would be in later entries of the Ness Saga, and nearly every striker performs some simple variation of the playable cast on special or super moves for the most part. Looking 2 games ahead, the King of Fighters 2001 similarly limited the roster of strikers to just the playable members of the cast, but where the King of Fighters 2001 differs from the King of Fighters 99 is that rather than being forced to choose 3-player characters, then the 4th team member as your striker, KOF 2001 allows the player to choose as many player characters as they want and as many strikers as they want. So if teams still consist of 4 fighters, you can then choose to have 2-player characters and 2 strikers, 1-player character and 3 strikers, the previous 3-player characters with a single striker, or 4-player characters without a striker at all, which could prove somewhat of an advantage against teams with fewer player characters. The entry in the NES saga whose striker system resembles Kameos the closest in my opinion though is present mostly within the King of Fighters 2000, so that's the game we'll predominantly be looking at today. In Mortal Kombat 1 we first have the playable portion of the cast and are then given a separate roster to choose our cameos after our player character, and as I mentioned prior, these cameos consist of characters who are Mortal Kombat mainstays like Scorpion, Jax, Kung Lao Sonya, and Sub-Zero, but we also get appearances from characters who haven't been usable in the series for some time, like Stryker and Motaro, even including faces who date back to Mortal Kombat's 3D era like Shujinko and Darius. By comparison, the striker system within the King of Fighters 2000 allows for every character within the playable roster to also be utilized as strikers, and not only this, but each playable member of the cast can also be swapped out for another striker character. Although the King of Fighters eventually became SNK's flagship series that has its own new characters and fully fleshed out lore, it was originally intended to be a crossover in a similar vein to that of Nintendo's Smash Bros. Series, with SNK mashing its pre-existing franchises together into this single fighting game. And while initially this idea mostly just resulted in the drafting of characters from their Fatal Fury, Psycho Soldier, Ikari Warriors, and the Art of Fighting franchises, the King of Fighters 2000 fully capitalizes on this original concept with which the series was founded, by having dozens of these alternate strikers who hail from not only early entries within the King of Fighters series like Mortal Kombat 1 does with its cameos, but instead from all sorts of different passive SNK and Neo Geo history. Newcomers to the series like Ramon have alternate strikers like the hot-headed Neo McDonald paired with the more calculated Geo Kentucky, the duo having names that are meant to reference SNK's Neo Geo system, as well as being the main characters of the classic SNK quiz game Quiz Dai Sosa-sen, The Last Countdown, released on those aforementioned Neo Geo systems in July of 1991. For their striker action, the two fittingly count down until releasing an explosion that sends opponents flying. Also Ramon's striker is Duke Edwards, protagonist from Burning Fight, who is a reformed street punk now turned detective that decides to go to war against the Japanese Yakuza with his partner Billy King. Burning Fight was initially SNK's answer to other beat-em-ups at the time like Sega's Streets of Rage and their rival Capcom's Final Fight series. But within the King of Fighters 2000, Duke Edwards' action as a striker consists of walking onto the stage and performing his submarine screw before making his departure. Speaking of Capcom, however, it's a pretty open secret that Art of Fighting's protagonist Ryo Sakazaki is the spitting image of Street Fighter's Ryu, and his friend Robert Garcia, who, like Ken Masters, comes from a wealthy non-Japanese background, with the two both being practitioners of the same Kyokugen Ryu fighting style, which has striking similarities to the Shotokan style utilized by both Ryu and Ken as well. Noticing these similarities, Capcom decided to poke fun at SNK by creating Dan Hibiki, a martial artist who employs what appears to be a bastardization of the Kyokugen Ryu karate fighting style while looking suspiciously similar to Robert and donning the gi with a black undershirt similar to Ryo's attire as well. Dan Hibiki has consistently been a running gag character within the Street Fighter series for his utter uselessness and failure to avenge his father's death at the hands of Sagat, somewhat mocking the Kyokugen Ryu style that Ryo utilizes, alongside the fact that Ryo is actually able to save his own father from the servitude of wealthy crime lords like Mr. Big and Geese Howard. SNK decided to respond to this by doubling down and making a copy of the copy that's copying the copy, with Robert Garcia striker another Robert who bears an uncanny resemblance to Dan, complete with the pink gi, and enters the stage with a dragon punch, but is also capable of draining some of your opponent's meter. While it is part of a bigger piece of SNK history, referencing their rivalry with Capcom, which is a video topic on its own, this striker is indeed in line with other playable members of the cast who possess alternative versions of themselves as strikers, like Kyo and K-Dash having both Seo and another K-Dash who served as rough prototypes or early concepts of the two protagonists we know and love today, or Athena Asamiya, whose striker is her ancestor Goddess or Princess Athena, originating from the 1986 platformer simply titled Athena. I could go on and on about the significance of each of these strikers within the SNK mythos and their own separate video, giving how they vary in importance and recognizability, from characters a part of SNK's other iconic franchises like Fio from Metal Slug, to more so obscure characters like G-Mantle, who was previously featured in advertisements for the Neo Geo, but most hilariously was a cab driver for Terry Bogard in the intro of the first Fatal Fury game. Considering that each playable character aside from Zero is worth 2 strikers, that would also mean that there are upwards of 70 strikers in in the game, before counting any characters that have hidden additional strikers like Iori, Ryo, or the aforementioned Ramon. From here, we can now go on to more so directly compare strikers to cameos and see which of the two perform better in certain aspects than the other. I'll start by saying that cameos are, at least in my opinion, a bit easier to confirm off of and to continue juggling opponents from. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it technically, but there seems to be an incredibly small window for the player character to link off of the striker, alongside the striker character's action occasionally being somewhat counterproductive by interrupting supers or having incredibly specific conditions for you to link off of them, since they do things like the mature and vice striker who throw their targets nearly off the screen entirely, leading to the very little options we have in the air. Cameos, on the other hand, make excellent aids for the player, with some being crucial to some of the combos of the playable cast and getting their maximum damage. The King of Fighters 2000 strikers also have limits on how many times they can be used per round and per character on your team. The first character can use the team striker a total of 3 times, the second character can use the team striker a total of 4 times, and the final character has access to a total of 5 uses with the team striker. Cameos, on the other hand, have unlimited uses per round so long as the cameo meter has regenerated. I personally have a difficult time deciding which of these I prefer completely, as while I do feel as if the limited usage of strikers inherently calls for more of the quick on the feet, crucial decision making that fighting games are known and enjoyed for, I also don't feel that if these strikers were altered to instead regenerate like a cameo, that any of that excitement or complexity would be lost in translation. Another point against strikers that I believe is worth a mention is that they're more so form over function, so to speak. Cameos so far at the time of recording have featured only 20 characters from Mortal Kombat, with some characters who are already a part of the playable portion of Mortal Kombat's roster, and although the over 70 strikers boast characters from all sorts of different walks of SNK history, they each can only perform a single maneuver. Meanwhile, cameos can perform multiple different actions depending on what you press when summoning them. Sub-Zero's neutral cameo provides some form of armor, with his forward cameo freezing his opponents and back cameo performing a simple slide. And there are way more instances of this throughout the game with much better cameos as well. A great example is Scorpion, whose up, neutral, and down cameo can juggle opponents, with his back cameo being a defensive option where he pulls the player away utilizing his spear, or his forward cameo being an offensive overhead. So while strikers represent more and that's cool, cameos do more, which can potentially lead to some pretty good setups or variety in your gameplay, depending on how you choose to react to your opponent and their own playstyle. It may sound as if cameos are strikers on steroids, and while that might be true considering how much different the King of Fighters 2000 could be if the two mechanics had some of their properties swapped, such as the timer or multiple actions, cameos being as stupidly overpowered as they are has led to some undeniable balancing issues within Mortal Kombat 1 that leads players to ask themselves if it was truly worth it. As I said, however, I myself still like Mortal Kombat 1 quite a bit, whether it be playing it or watching it whenever I get the chance, and while the King of Fighters 2000 will always just be the King of Fighters 2000, NRS seems as if they're going to be making some considerable changes to the game soon with the new Chaos Reigns expansion they have coming in September of this year, meaning that we could potentially be receiving a massive overhaul of not only the cameo system, but some portions of the main cast as well may also be receiving some remarkable changes. However, we'll just have to wait and see where the game goes from here. But that's about all I really have to say regarding the topic today. I have other fighting game content on my channel you may be interested in, and I plan to make a couple other videos about the King of Fighters like this one in celebration of the King of Fighters 30th anniversary. So be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss those, or simply just to be notified of what I get up to in the future, such as when I upload or stream. Like the video to support both the channel and myself, as well as let me know that this is the type of content you want to see. Comment down below if I missed anything or with suggestions you may have for the future. Thank you all for watching, and have a blessed day.